This episode was pre-recorded as part of a live continuing education webinar. On-demand CEUs are still available for this presentation through AllCEUs. Register at allceus.com/counselor toolbox. Hey there, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to today's presentation on understanding anxiety through a child's eyes. I am Dr. Dawn-Elise Snipes. Today, we're going to identify symptoms of anxiety in children because it doesn't look exactly like it looks in adults all the time. We'll review common misdiagnoses, want to make sure we're treating what we need to be treating, explain how children's developmental stage impacts their fears, and propose interventions to help children deal with anxiety. So basically, we're going to start out with a primer, and I'm going to go through that kind of fast because my guess is most of you are pretty familiar with the anxiety diagnostic criteria, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts. In children, emotional signs of anxiety. The child can be extremely sensitive. They can cry really easy or get upset really easily. They may be irritable. They may be afraid of making even minor mistakes, and this can include things like test anxiety. They can have panic attacks. They may have phobias about bees, dogs, storms, whatever, and exaggerated fears about things like natural disasters. Every time there's a strong thunderstorm, they may worry that there's going to be a tornado. They may worry about things that are far in the future. They may have frequent nightmares, get distracted from playing by their worries, which, that's kind of sad. If a kid can't focus, can't pretend, can't play because their anxiety is getting in the way, then that's something to look at. Additionally, when they're playing, if they are acting out anxiety-based scenarios, we want to pay attention to this. If they're acting out a hurricane coming or something, you want to pay attention and maybe talk to them about what's going on. And another emotional sign, this is kind of physical too, may have compulsive or repetitive behaviors, especially when they get upset. They may rock, they may rub their arms, they may have, my daughter, when she used to go to sleep at night, had this stuffed animal she called Dirty Blue. We had Clean Blue, which was the brand new one, and we had Dirty Blue, which obviously was well worn. But whenever she would get stressed or when she would go to sleep, she would just rub Dirty Blue's tail. And, that's one of those repetitive behaviors. It was very self-soothing for her. But when it wasn't bedtime, when she wasn't trying to drift off to sleep, if she was, actively holding on to Blue and petting Blue, that was an indication that maybe she might be anxious. So these are the things we want to look for in kids. They may not have the same worries. They may not pace the floor like an adult might or do some of the same things. Behavioral signs. Kids may start having meltdowns or tantrums. This makes a lot of sense. If they are already anxious, then any sort of stimulus that adds to that may push them over the edge, so to speak, and they may feel like they just don't have anything more to give. Additionally, meltdowns and tantrums. What is the result of those? When a child has we'll just call them a meltdown, adults usually come and help comfort, help soothe, help set boundaries. So one place that you're having, or one benefit, if you want to look at it that way, of a child having a meltdown is he gets that contact, that soothing from the parent. Sometimes there will be physical connection, which is generally helpful during a meltdown because it helps bring out that oxytocin and helps the child feel more safe. Doesn't always happen. If the child is constantly asking what if, and not, what if dogs could fly, but what if there's a tornado? What if a fire starts in the house? What if I get sick with the flu? Anything that might indicate a worry sort of thing. Toddlers and even older kids sometimes are going to ask a lot of what if questions just because they're learning. But we want to look at the content of those questions and see if there's an anxiety basis to it. If they avoid participating in group activities or remain silent or preoccupied during group work, this may indicate some social anxiety, or it may indicate that they are just so worried about whatever it is that they can't focus, they can't play, they can't pretend, they can't have fun. They are just verklempt. If they refuse to go to school, this could be anxiety of bullies. This could be anxiety of something else at school. This could be anxiety of something happening to the parent while they're at school. We want to understand, why is it that you don't want to go to school? What's going on? They may avoid social situations with peers after school or on weekends. This could have many different causes. We do want to look at it. Are they exhausted? Are they anxious about social interaction? Are their peers bullying them in some sort of way? Are they, again, afraid of being separated from their primary caregiver, and so they forego social activities so they can tag along with their primary caregiver? If they become emotional or angry when separated from parents. Now, there's that initial separation anxiety phase that all kids go through. And if they are securely attached, there's a little bit of distress and upsetness during the initial separation. And then once they realize everything's going to be okay, just like when the first day of school, then it's all good. But if it's a constant behavior, every time you drop them off at daycare, every time you drop them off at grandma's house or at school or wherever, they are becoming emotional or angry. I remember this one young child that used to get so distraught every day when his parents would drop him off at school. And this was when my son and he were in first grade. And it just broke my heart to see how upset he would get, because there was something to it. Obviously at 6 years old, he was past that stage of separation anxiety that we would expect. So my thought was, what's going on with this young child? A child who constantly seeks approval may have anxiety, that anxiety of rejection. Remember, children depend on us, their caregivers, for food, for shelter, for medical care, for all of those Maslowian needs. And if they are fearful that they are going to be rejected, that we will kick them to the curb, so to speak, then they may constantly seek approval to make sure that, do you still love me? Are you still going to be here to feed me? If they have low self-esteem and low self-efficacy, if they don't feel good about themselves, they may already feel like they are not lovable. And that can create a fear of rejection. With rejection, especially at that age, they can't fend for themselves. And that's terrifying. That's devastating. At that age, they may still be afraid of the dark, and being, tossed out into the street, so to speak, as a child would be terrifying. And they may be overly concerned about negative evaluations. We want to help them not globalize. If they get a negative evaluation, they didn't do this particular chore right, they didn't get an A on this test at school, they didn't, whatever it is they didn't do that resulted in a negative evaluation, they didn't make the, football team at school. Okay, it happened. There was a negative outcome, a negative evaluation. You didn't make the cut, but it doesn't mean you're not lovable. It doesn't mean that you don't have other strengths. We want to make sure that they don't focus on the one failure or the one criticism and dismiss all of the positives. A lot of adults do that too. Physical signs of anxiety in children. Frequently complains of headaches or stomach aches. We see this in adults too. Refuses to eat snacks or lunch at school. Could be they're having their lunch money stolen and they don't want to bring money for lunch because they don't want to have that happen. They may be have their stomach too upset when they're at school to be able to eat. They become restless, fidgety, or hyperactive. If they're sitting still, that anxiety can kind of build if they're worried about what's going to happen next. Difficulty concentrating, starting to shake or sweat in intimidating situations. Most of us do that. Dizziness. When we get anxious, our blood pressure goes up. When our blood pressure goes up, we can get dizzy. Frequent urge to urinate. Constantly tensing muscles. Exaggerated startle response. These are a lot of these physical symptoms are very common in adults as well as children. They have trouble falling or staying asleep. If they fall asleep in school, that could actually be a sign of anxiety. If they are too stressed to get good sleep at night, they can't get that quality restorative sleep, then they may be dozing off in school. And let's think about situations that might cause that anxiety. If parents are fighting or if parents are stressed, children usually pick up on that. Maybe they're not fighting, but it is something about maybe the parents are not fighting, but they're stressed, and the child is picking up on that. They may have repetitive activities like tapping or leg shaking, nail biting, skin picking, or rigid routines. I worked with a couple children when I was working at the clinic in Florida. When it would come time for the end of the year state tests, these poor children would literally pick out their eyebrow hairs or pull out their eyelashes because they were so stressed. We want to pay attention to this. If children are starting to, pick at their skin or bite their nails, and we don't normally see them do this, we want to take a look at it. Some people have a bad habit of nail biting. It doesn't necessarily mean they're stressed, but in children, it's a pretty good clue. So let's think about how children think differently and why their anxiety may be different than an adult's. From 0 to 2, object permanence is still developing, and they're developing personal agency. When they cry or when they are upset, their caregiver hopefully responds to meet their needs. That teaches them that they have some control over their situation. They communicate a need, it gets met. When they get a little bit older, they'll be sitting in their high chair and they play the uh-oh game. They'll drop their bottle on the floor and they'll just go, uh-oh. And then you pick it up, you put it back on the tray, and they drop it again just to make sure that you're going to pick it up a second time. They're trying to figure out how the world works. They also start learning how to ask for food and drinks as they get towards the end of this age. When a child is not getting their needs met, then they may already be stressed out. That HPA axis is activated when they're overtired or too hot, too cold, have low blood sugar. If they're not getting those basic needs met, they're going to be in that threat status. And that threat status can feel like anxiety. Think about what infants do when they are not getting their needs met. They cry. They cry to try to get their needs met. Now, we can put labels on it of angry or distressed or whatever, but it could also be anxiety. From ages 2 to 7, children are very egocentric. They think the way they perceive the world is the way everybody perceives the world. They personalize a lot of stuff. They think that whatever happens, somehow they caused it in a lot of situations. They think concretely and dichotomously. When things happen, this is the way it is. This is what I saw. This is what I think. So that must be how it is. And dichotomously, you either love me or you hate me. I'm either a good boy or I'm a bad boy. There's no in between. And they can be a little bit mystical. At this age, they're still watching cartoons. Well, I still watch cartoons and I'm 50 years old, but whatever. They're watching cartoons and they're having difficulty at this age determining the difference between fantasy and reality. It can get really confusing. I remember when I was that age, my mother had to forbid me from watching Scooby-Doo because every time I watched Scooby-Doo, I would have nightmares for like a week. And that's just part of the way the brain works in children because they have difficulty figuring out what's real. I realized that Scooby-Doo was a cartoon and it wasn't real, but maybe it was based on something real, and this was just a drawing of something that really happened. Who knows? Let's think about some of these situations that might prompt anxiety. If the child says, "Daddy yelled at me, Daddy left, so Daddy hates me and it's my fault." Think about a couple who is arguing. Maybe they're getting ready to separate or get divorced, and there's some tension in the house, so dad is already on edge, and Junior does something that probably was just he didn't mean to do, but dad yells at him, and then dad storms out of the house, and then suddenly the parents are getting divorced. In the child's mind, he's like, "Oh, I caused this. I caused daddy to get mad and he left, and I'm the reason that he got mad, so it must be my fault. I told mommy I hated her, she got sick, and it's my fault." I hear this one a lot. When parents get sick, when caregivers get sick, children are trying to understand why. Why did this happen? Why are you getting so sick? Was it something that I did? And a lot of times, since they tend to personalize things, they will try to take responsibility for it. I told her I hated her, that made her sad, and then she got sick, so her getting sad must have caused her to get sick. We need to help them ferret out that stuff and understand what caused what. I didn't say my prayers last night. We got into a car accident because God is mad at me. Or the neighbor's dog always charges the fence and wants to bite me, and this makes me scared, so dogs must be dangerous. Just because, and we need to help children start separating emotion-based reasoning from fact-based reasoning. But we also, again, need to help them separate the fact that very few things always happen. Dogs. Some dogs are not nice. And, I won't say any particular breed because I've met beautiful dogs from every single breed that I've ever interacted with. And I've been doing rescue for 20 some odd years now. But there are some dogs, just like some people, that are very angry and are very scared themselves, and they can tend to be aggressive. We don't want to say that all dogs are nice, because that's not true. We don't want to say that all dogs are dangerous either. We want to help them understand that, most dogs are very sweet, and let's look at why the dog might be charging the fence and barking. Maybe he doesn't want to bite you. Maybe he does. I don't know the situation. But looking at that situation and helping the child understand that that is a particular dog in a particular situation, where, there might be 6 other dogs down the street that are perfectly happy. At ages 7 to 11, we start into this inductive reasoning age. If a child says something like, "I didn't make the team," or "I got a C on my spelling test, I must be a failure," they make global attributions from specifics. One episode, one dog means all dogs must be scary. One bad grade means I must be stupid. Getting in trouble at home one time may translate to, I'm a bad kid, I'm unlovable. We want to make sure that they're separating who they are from what they do, as well as isolating things. Yes, you're going to fail at some things. Nobody is good at everything. You failed at this particular thing, but let's look at these other things that you're good at. Over age 11, there's more advanced reasoning, but little life experience, and they've often not questioned prior faulty schema. And this is where it becomes challenging. We think, by 13, they should know better. Oh, who says? Who taught them to know better? They still don't have a lot of life experience. Getting up and going to give a speech in front of their whole class may be terrifying to them. You or I have probably done it 40 times in college when we had to give presentations, and we may not like it, but it's not totally terrifying to us. And we can tell the child it's not a big deal, but to them it is, because they've never done it before. They don't have prior experiences that they can draw on to say, yeah, I went up and I gave that speech and it was no big deal. They just don't have that. We need to help them develop the distress tolerance skills and figure out how to handle it, and share with them what our first experience was like. Instead of thinking about how I think about doing presentations right now, I need to think about what was it like the first time I had to get up in class, if I can remember, and give a speech in front of my peers. Anxiety is fear, which is the flee part of the fight or flight or stress response. We want to remember that they are both reactions to a threat. People get anxious, and if they get anxious and they feel cornered, then they may get angry to try to protect themselves. Or if they get anxious and they can get away, they may flee in some sort of way. What do we fear? Well, what do children fear? They fear death. Most of us fear death. They may not be able to articulate it that way, but that's one of the reasons they have separation anxiety at a young age, because ingrained in our brain somewhere, we know that we need our adult caregivers to provide for our needs. A 2-year-old's not going to go, I don't need you, and put on his Pampers and walk out the door. The child knows that they need caregiving. Rejection, isolation, and abandonment. If our caregivers reject, isolate, or abandon us, then again, as a child, we can't take care of ourselves. As adults, we can say, all right, whatever, I can go to the store, I can do my own thing. Children can't do that. Children are terrified because they, again, can't articulate it, but often know that without a caregiver of some sort, they wouldn't be able to survive. Children are very afraid of the unknown, and this could be the unknown, flying on a airplane flight for the first time, or going to a new place for the first time, sleeping for the first night in their big boy bed or their big girl bed. I remember my daughter was terrified the first night that she was sleeping in her own bed. She wasn't sleeping in the bunk bed with underneath her brother, and she was just terrified that night because it was the unknown. She hadn't done it before. It wasn't that there was anything all that scary. It wasn't a new house, but it was a new experience, and she hadn't done it before. And she didn't have any schema to draw on to say, oh, when I sleep by myself, that's just not something she had in her repertoire. And loss of control is another thing that children fear. They fear losing control of themselves. They fear their parents rejecting them. They fear getting bullied. There's a lot of things that children may fear. So what's causing the anxiety? Cognitively, we can look at unhelpful thoughts. Look at those cognitive distortions: magnification, exaggeration, personalization, mind reading. The list that's out there. Cognitively, lack of knowledge can also cause the anxiety, as we've been talking about. If they haven't done it before, then they have no information to draw on to understand what it might be like, which means it could be really intimidating. We can help impart some knowledge by walking them through it, explaining it to them, giving them a scenario of what happened when we did it the first time, whatever it was. Going to school the first day can be terrifying for people. Physically, lack of sleep can contribute to anxiety, and anxiety can contribute to lack of sleep. Poor nutrition or hunger and imbalanced hormones, either sex hormones or thyroid hormones. So when estrogen or testosterone, especially adolescents, it's all over the place. Thyroid hormones, especially hyperthyroid, can cause some symptoms of anxiety. We want to make sure that their blood sugar is stable, their physiologically everything is in balance, their hormones and things, and they're getting enough sleep. Emotionally, some children are just more sensitive than others. They are more aware of what's going on around them, and some practitioners will call them high needs childs. We need to be aware of them. In dialectical behavior therapy, Linehan talks about people who emotionally dysregulate easily as potentially being highly sensitive, and in environments in which they don't have those needs met, because people downplay their sensitivity. That's a very rejecting and invalidating environment, and that can feel very scary because the child is dysregulating and nobody's there teaching him what tools to use to regulate. I mean, he's going, I feel out of control, somebody help me. And he's getting told, just go play or something, you'll be fine. And the child doesn't feel like they're going to be fine. Environmentally and socially, bullies, teacher pressure, parental enmeshment or disengagement can both cause anxiety. When parents helicopter, it can feel oppressive to some children. Or if the parent's completely disengaged emotionally, physically, or both, then the child may fear abandonment. A chaotic home environment due to mental health, addiction, or abuse or neglect. Look at those adverse childhood experiences. All those things can contribute to anxiety, as well as social learning. If they see other people getting bullied, if they see other people getting abandoned, if they see their friends going into foster care and getting yanked out of their homes, they may get really scared and not understand the full scope of what was going on, why Johnny got put in foster care. So they get anxious about what's happening. Differential diagnosis. Well, in the DSM, there are multiple anxiety disorders. So we need to ferret through those and see if it's a phobia or social anxiety, generalized anxiety, separation anxiety. We want to look at depression as well. Some children, when they're depressed, it looks a lot like anxiety. They may be especially emotional, especially sensitive, yada. ADHD and ADD can also look like anxiety because of the agitation and the restlessness. People with autism or autism spectrum disorders may have symptoms that overlap with anxiety, the repetitive behaviors, the sensitivity, the withdrawal, and not wanting to interact socially. The same thing with PTSD. If a child has acute stress disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder, they may be overwhelmed. They may be hypervigilant. They may not want to interact with others. They may have withdrawn socially. And oppositional defiant disorder can also be misdiagnosed. Sometimes children who are anxious become angry. They are, fight or flee. They are not getting their anxiety met. They're trying to protect themselves. So they may become somewhat oppositional or defiant, either to protect themselves or to try to incite the caregivers to provide that structure that they're so wanting. What do? Infants to 2 years old. Well, there's only so much reasoning you can do with a 1-year-old. Be responsive. Before 6 months, you're just extinguishing behaviors, explains Dr. Chilton matter-of-factly. Eventually, the baby just gives up. Loss of parental contact is a serious danger signal for young babies, and they're designed to cry until it's restored. But beyond a certain point, even a hysterical baby will quit crying. They cry themselves out, so to speak. This is because, in an evolutionary sense, an unprotected crying baby is broadcasting its whereabouts to predators. Instinct tells it that its parents have vanished and that the tiger that killed them is close by, so it falls silent in order to survive. That was a very interesting way of thinking about things. And whether we don't really know what the infant is thinking, but it's definitely a possibility. With children that are infants to 2, if they're talking, talk it out. Start teaching emotional vocabulary and needs identification early on. Even when the child is an infant and they're not speaking back, they're hearing, they're listening. You can say, oh, you're scared. Oh, you're angry. Identify the feelings for the child as you're soothing them. The dog scares you, or the sound is loud, and loud sounds can be scary for you. Talking it out for them. They may still not be verbal, but if they hear that, and if you get used to saying that from jump, then when they're 18 months, 2 years old, and they're really starting to understand language better, they're going to learn how to use this same structure of sentence in order to identify their feeling and what is going on. Toddlers struggle with being able to correctly identify their emotions and find the right words to describe that emotion. So use feeling faces. They're really good most of the time at identifying emojis. Have them identify what their emojis are. Have practice identifying feelings in videos. Pause a cartoon or a video you're watching and ask how the different characters are feeling. Or you can even play a game where kind of like Pictionary, where you put on a face and you say, what is this face for? With my kids, we used to do that a lot. I thought it was really cute. And I would ask Sean, I'd be like, show me angry. What does angry look like? And he would act out angry. And I'd say, show me happy. And we'd go through a variety of different emotions. So we had a minimal vocabulary. We didn't go into, the nuances because he was 2, but he had the basics. So he could tell me generally what he was feeling. Play games with children of this age to help them with their fears. You may start with hide and seek. Object permanence, obviously, ideally has developed, with little children, infants, they're crawling, you can play hide and seek, covering your face, bouncing down behind the sofa, something where, you're right there. When they get more mobile and they can come look for you, don't make it hard, walk right outside the room instead of, trying to go into the bedroom and hide under the bed or something. And ideally don't hide under the bed because that's scary in and of itself. You also may try mommy and me classes or play dates to help children start developing their social skills in a less threatening environment. 2 to 7-year-olds, provide structure and consistency. Let the child know the plans for the day and what's happening next, like with a daily schedule chart. My son, when he was, well, even today, but especially when he was little, he was very structured. And I've shared this with you guys before. He went to school one time, to preschool, and it was somebody's birthday. And he got to preschool and he walked downstairs, and apparently, his teacher tells me, he went and plopped right down on the circle because they started each day with circle time. And that wasn't how it was going that day. And they were celebrating somebody's birthday, and he refused to get off the circle because he kept telling his teacher, no, Miss Jessica, it's circle time. We'll do parties later. And okay. He wasn't upset about it, but he was just very determined that that's how things were going to go. We do want to give children plenty of warning before transitioning, and that can help a lot in school situations, but also at home or at the playground. Give them a verbal warning, or at school, you may use a bell or some sort of a chant. For example, the clock on the wall says it's time to stop, time to stop, time to stop. The clock on the wall says it's time to stop. It's time to go to, go to lunch, or it's time to go to bed, or it's time to go outside, wherever they're supposed to go next. But that gets them a little chant, and they know what they're supposed to do. And it's a nice transition for kids to help them get out of one zone and move to the next zone. You know how hard it is sometimes after you've seen a client, for example, to switch from being empathetic and focused on a person and talking and listening to writing notes. I mean, that's 2 different zones. Children have even more difficulty switching gears, so to speak. To the tune of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, stop, look, and listen, hands by your side, listen close, and I'll tell you why. So there's a lot of different chants you can find online. You can Google them. You can also make them up if you like children's songs and you have a knack with rhythm. Ensure children know what's expected. Use a rules chart or coloring pages. For children who are not reading yet, they can still look at pictures. They know what they're supposed to do. They can have coloring pages, maybe when they start preschool for the first day, or right before they go to preschool. You can get them a coloring book that shows them, or before they go on their first dentist visit. And review the rules ahead of time. Just go over it one more time right before they walk into the dentist's office or grandma's house or wherever they're going. This is what we do here. This is what we don't do. And be patient when they test rules. If we get upset, if we freak out on them when they test rules, they may feel ashamed and they may feel rejected, which may prompt anxiety for trying anything again. It's like, oh crap, that was a really bad thing. Understand that sometimes they're going to test rules. Sean, when we went to my grandmother's house, knew good and well he wasn't supposed to be touching the television. And we walked into grandma's and we were hanging out, and he looked at the television and he said to me, "No touch." I said, "You're right, no touch." He walks directly over to the television, somewhat obstinately touches the television, and he goes, "Time out." I said, "Yep, time out." He just wanted to make sure that the rules were the same at grandma's house, that what we had talked about was the same. He toddled over to timeout and sat down and understood, and he didn't touch the TV again after that. I didn't have to get upset with him, and it was important for me to recognize that that was his way of trying to feel in control of that situation, because everything was so new and it was a little bit overwhelming to be in such a situation when you're 2. Teach mindful awareness. Help children start learning at a very early age about physical sensations, urges, and thoughts associated with emotions. So when they start getting anxious, they notice. When they start feeling a little fidgety, they can figure out whether they're restless or whether they're stressed about something. Teach distress tolerance skills, such as deep breathing. Most kids, especially once they can count to 4, can count to 4 as they inhale and count to 4 as they exhale, and that can help them slow down their breathing. You can also, with children, instead of the counting, you can have them put their hand on their belly and imagine when they're inhaling, filling up a great big balloon, and see how big they can get that balloon filled, and then let the air out of the balloon. We can teach them positive self-talk. That's always a good thing to start out with teaching kids, so they feel empowered, they feel lovable, and they feel like they've got some control over situations. And we need to teach them how to get support, how to understand that it's okay to ask for help if they are feeling anxious or if they don't know what to do next. Join kids in their reality. Reassure them that there's no danger. Talk with them about how when they're anxious, there's this anxiety monkey that likes to play tricks on them. And then you can talk with them about monkey mind. If you have a stuffed monkey that you can use for a prop, even better. We named our monkey Reginald. And sometimes Reginald isn't ready to sleep, and you can use guided imagery with the monkey and talk about what do we need to do to help Reginald get relaxed to sleep. You can also talk with them about Reginald. Sometimes Reginald doesn't know what's going to happen, so he makes you think about the worst possible thing that can happen. So what could you tell Reginald? This puts the child in the position of power because he's comforting the anxiety monkey. He's telling Reginald it's going to be okay, and hopefully parroting and mimicking what he's heard from his caregivers. And as he says that, he will also hear it. As he's comforting Reginald, he will hear it himself. You can have them create a sculpture or drawing of their superhero, and this is the imaginary friend or hero that can help protect them from their anxiety. It can help protect them at night. Have them envision something and really create something that they can visualize when they're going to sleep. They can visualize their superhero flying around their room or whatever it is that makes them feel safer. Play with them in the dark. Go hunting for fireflies, make a big tent and at night in the house and play in the dark with flashlights. Help them learn how fun it can be to be in the dark. Play with, you can get the paint that still glows in the dark. I always loved glow in the dark when I was little. I don't know why, but having something that glows in the dark can be kind of cool. You can put a tap light by their bed, a light that goes off after 10-15 minutes, but if they wake up in the middle of the night, all they've got to do is reach over and smack it and it turns back on, so they can feel more grounded and more centered more quickly. Make sure to applaud small steps like sleeping through the night or going to their first day of school. Anything that helps them approach their fear and start to take control of it, we want to applaud it, even if it's just once. They slept through the night last night, or they slept until 2, which was a marked improvement over sleeping only until 10. Whatever the small steps are, applaud them, show them that they're loved for who they are, and you're proud of any progress they make. But you also understand that sometimes they're not going to have good days, and that's okay too. Address distortions, those cognitive distortions, to reassure kids that they're safe and loved. All or none thinking. Young children have that dichotomous way of envisioning things. Help them remember and tell them. They may not really conceptualize it right away, but repeat it to them. I can be mad at your behavior and still love you. Address global attributions by looking at facts and provide information. We already talked about some of that. Okay, you didn't do so well on your math test, but you did well on your reading, and you're doing well in PE, and you're doing great with your piano lessons. Whatever it is, help them see that they're good at things, even if they have a failure, or if they get into a fight with a friend. Maybe that friend is no more, but they have other friends. We want them to focus on the big picture, not be super focused on the one negative thing. And try to discourage the use of extreme words like everyone and always. Most of the time, those words are exaggerations. When they say everyone hates me, or I always fail at this, we want to encourage them to soften their language a little bit. And this can be kind of a game. If you've ever played the baby game at a baby shower, if you say the word baby, then you have to, I don't remember, I think you lose your safety pin, and whoever has the most safety pins at the end of the game gets a prize. Okay, well, same sort of thing with extreme words. If they can start being more cognizant, and it can be a game in the family, when they hear extreme words, they can catch it, and maybe they get a token in a jar, and at the end of the week, whoever has the most tokens in the jar wins. You can make a game out of it. Magnification and generalization. Keep a frequency chart. If they are worried that you are going to leave them, you are going to abandon them, then keep a frequency chart of how many times you came back home. Monday night, came back home. Tuesday night, came back home. Wednesday night. So they start to see a pattern of, yes, you're going to leave for work, but guess what? You're going to come back home. And some of these fears can happen in young children. Sometimes they are triggered after a traumatic event of some sort. We just want to be sensitive and help them have something concrete to look at to conceptualize what's going on. Minimize the exposure to the news. Unfortunately, the news likes to glorify all the negative stuff, and discussions about the news, even in your household. Children can hear and they understand, but they don't understand everything. What they hear, they may think is an imminent threat right outside their door, or something that is ongoing, even though it may have happened 6 months ago. Children have difficulty understanding that the media just replays stuff, and it may have ended already, and it may be 2,000 miles away. If they hear it, or when they hear it, because they're going to hear some of it, making sure to help them understand that they are safe. Maybe there was a shooting in, I'll use my area, in Nashville. Well, Nashville's 35 miles away from where I'm at. I'm out in the middle of the boondocks, and kids can, when I talk to my kids about it, we're out in the middle of farmland. It's not very likely that we are going to be in a situation where there's a mass shooting. We can talk about things like that. We can talk about how, with my kids who are older, wouldn't do this with a 7-year-old, but we can talk about ways to stay safe if they go into situations. Unfortunately, certain stores, not going to name them, have had several shootings at them over the past 6 months, and making sure that kids feel safe when they are going into public places. Address distortions to make sure they feel safe and loved. Personalization. Encourage the child to identify their emotions, generally happy, mad, sad, glad, angry, the basics. We don't need to get into nuances, and explore with them why they feel that way. You can have them make a collage about these are the things that make me scared, or you can even do a scrapbook. And with younger children, you can use coloring pages, cut out the coloring pages and glue them onto one side of a scrapbook, and this is the thing that makes them scared. And then on the other side, so you have a book that's open, you've got the left side is what makes them scared, the right side is the resolution or something that would make them feel safe, so they can see that both can exist. Ask them questions like, have you ever felt guilty about something but it wasn't your fault? 2, 3, 4-year-olds are going to have difficulty with that, but your 6 or 7-year-olds might start being able to say, yeah, you know what, that wasn't my fault that Janie fell off the monkey bars. Have you ever been mad at me but still love me? You can ask questions like that, because children start thinking, if you're mad, then you must not love me. That's that global thinking. Put it back on them and say, have you ever done this and still loved me? And they'll probably be like, yeah. And okay, so I may be mad at what you did, but I still love you. And that can help them feel safer and calmer. And talk to them, if it's appropriate, about how sometimes bad things happen and it's just nobody's fault. There's a tornado and it's just nobody's fault. There is there are some things that you could try to point blame, but with kids, we want to focus on the malice and the intent. A lot of times people aren't intending to hurt one another. If there's a car wreck, it may not have been anyone's intent to create a car wreck. So for 2 to 7-year-olds, it's nobody's fault. It happened. It was a bad thing. Once they get older, you can debate the nuances with them. 7 years old and older, remember the small size of their world and relative lack of experience makes everything seem much bigger. They're constantly growing and changing, so some days they may feel more tired, may have more difficulty feeling like they fit in, and may feel more awkward and less capable, which can all trigger that anxiety, that fear of rejection, fear of being made fun of, fear of being able to keep up. When they are little, they are, and they're at home, they're often a big fish in a little jar. But when they go to school, they're still the same size fish, but that jar is so much bigger, and it can be really overwhelming. General anxiety management skills help them keep their blood sugar stable. The brain is one of the biggest utilizers of blood glucose. So some children have difficulty keeping their blood sugar stable during the school day if they're doing a lot of cognitively intense work. Making sure that they're eating is really important. Make sure they're getting enough sleep. Remember, children still need generally 9 to 11 hours of good quality sleep. And when they have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning or 6:30 in the morning to get ready to meet the bus, count backwards. Where's 9 hours of sleep? And yeah, it seems early, but it's important for them for development, cognition, anxiety reduction, all that stuff. Practice positive self-talk at home. Encourage them to talk about their capabilities and their courage. I can do this, or I'm excited about, if they've got a big presentation or a math test coming up. Instead of talking about what they're worried about, have them talk about what they are excited about or what they think they're going to be best at on the test. So they start getting excited, or ask them, the test covers these 10 chapters. Which chapter was your favorite, and which thing are you best at? Why don't you show me how you do one of those math problems? they feel efficacious going into the test, and it can help reduce some of their anxiety. You can also talk with them about test taking strategies and things, so they feel prepared and they realize that very rarely does everybody or does anybody know all of the answers on a particular test. Encourage them to practice checking the facts, so they're separating emotional from factual reasoning. They feel scared. They feel scared because that dog is charging at them. What are the facts? Is that dog likely to get out? Is that dog really wanting to eat them, or is it just being a dog and coming over to say hi? Use visualizations. Encourage them to visualize themselves succeeding at doing things. Encourage them to visualize themselves sleeping through the night. Encourage them to visualize themselves on the first day of school or going to that dentist appointment. Whatever they're seeing, encourage them to visualize. I remember before each of my children, I would practice visualizing the whole birthing process and getting through it. And it helps to see that, yes, I think I really can do this. I can see myself succeeding. Deep breathing. Again, fill that balloon. For the older children, they can count to 4 and exhale for 4. But for smaller children, have them fill their belly balloon. Encourage them to practice mindfulness to nip anxiety in the bud. Young children can practice this too. If we teach them before meals to just check in with themselves and tell us how they're feeling and what they're thinking about right then. With children, you're not going to get into the nitty-gritty, but let's just get the basics. Encourage them to start being introspective. Remind them to get support from people who care about them unconditionally. They can keep a list or a picture book of the people that love them and can help them. Have them find mentors, and this is for older kids. Have them find mentors who've gone through the same thing. Maybe there's somebody at their school who's already tried out for the cheer squad. Have them talk to somebody who's been there and has experienced it and can tell them what it might be like. Encourage the entire family to spend 5 minutes focusing on the positives each day. And you can do this when you start dinner or before everybody goes to bed, whatever it is. Everybody spends a few minutes telling, the 3 best things that happened to me today. That doesn't mean the bad things didn't happen, because bad things happen. But for that moment, get in the positivity zone and remember the good things that happened, and then you can talk about the other stuff. Just because you have a thought that something is scary or feel anxious doesn't necessarily mean it's fearful or fearsome. Roller coasters, for example, there is not much logical data to support roller coasters being dangerous, but I am terrified of them. I went on one once and that was plenty for me, thank you. I realize it's an irrational fear. However, it's one of those things, and I recognize that logically it kind of makes no sense, and I accept, I haven't worried about trying to desensitize that one because I never go on roller coasters. Wasps, for example, if children are afraid of wasps, I have a friend who's terrified of wasps, and she's not allergic to them or anything. She's just terrified of them. She has the thought that wasps are fearsome, and we have these little things called they're bigger, paper wasps up here, and they're about the most docile things in the world. They'll fly around and land on my screen door and stuff. I have one, I think it's the same one, I don't know, but I call him George, and periodically I'll open the door and he'll fly onto the screen door, and he just won't want to fly off. So okay, whatever, he can hang out there for a while. He doesn't bother me because objectively I know he's about as docile as can be. However, I haven't had bad experiences, and I've practiced addressing my anxiety with wasps when I first got introduced to paper wasps, because I don't like killing things that don't need to be killed. And so I had a reason to desensitize to that. So now wasps are my friend. For her, not so much. And she recognizes too that wasps aren't necessarily really scary, but she still holds this fear and she's not interested in pursuing desensitization, and that's fine. With children, encourage them to do the same thing. If they are terrified of something, maybe they're terrified of I don't know, horror movies. Okay, is there anything scary, actually dangerous about a horror movie? No. Are they terrified of them? Yes. Is there any reason to fight that and desensitize it? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not. Have them address it objectively. Children's cognitive, physical, and experiential differences make their anxiety different than that of adults. Remember, we have 20, 30, 40 years of schema and experiences to draw on that are either exactly the same as what we're getting ready to do or what we're fearing, or very similar that we can draw on and recognize that we have nothing to worry about. Children's symptoms of anxiety also manifest differently, with more irritability, defiance, and somatic complaints. Anxiety disorders are frequently misdiagnosed as ADD, autism spectrum disorders, oppositional defiant disorder, and PTSD. Children's fears often focus around Maslow's lower three needs. They're getting their biological needs met, their safety needs met, or being lovable. Addressing anxiety means helping the child understand in a developmentally appropriate way that they will have what they need, that they are safe, and they will always belong and be loved. As far as at what point do you refer a child to counseling? Not to be a cop-out, but when their anxiety starts causing them clinically significant distress. Every person, child, adult, whatever, we all have anxieties about things. If it is starting to cause them distress or it seems to be growing, then intervention is probably helpful, professional intervention. Otherwise, when we are anxious, when children are anxious, it is important to address it right then and let them know that we're not going to dismiss it and ignore it and tell them just to get over it. There's nothing to be worried about. We will sit with them. We will hear them. We will try to walk half a block in their shoes. A mile's a long way in a 2-year-old shoes. And we will try to understand why they might be scared. What is it that they're afraid is going to happen that might be triggering their threat response? Once we can understand it from their perspective, then we can provide them some more effective solutions. And Maribel has a good suggestion, encouraging people, not just children, to practice that deep breathing even when it's not needed, so you get in the habit of doing it and it works. I practice deep breathing every night as I'm going to sleep. It's just sort of a game to see how quickly I can slow my heart rate down and get into that relaxation state. I need a hobby, but that can help people not only get in the habit of doing it, but also start to trust the process, because they feel the difference. Once they start taking those deep breaths, they realize that their heart rate is slowed down and their anxiety has gone away. Are there any other questions? Alrighty, everybody. And even if you're not afraid of the dark, tap into that inner child someday and make a blanket fort in the living room and get out some flashlights and bake chocolate chip cookies. And, I don't know. I like regressing every once in a while. Everybody have a great week, and I will see you next Tuesday. Between writing notes, filing insurance claims, and scheduling with clients, it can be hard to stay organized. That's why I recommend Therapy Notes. Their easy-to-use platform lets you manage your practice securely and efficiently. Visit therapynotes.com to get 2 free months of therapy notes by just using the promo code CEU when you sign up for a free trial at therapynotes.com. If this podcast helps you help your clients or yourself, please support us by purchasing your CEUs at allceus.com or getting your agency to sponsor an episode. A direct link to the on-demand CEUs for this podcast is at allceus.com/podcast CEUs. That's allceus.com/podcast CEUs. To sponsor an episode of Counselor Toolbox and reach over 50,000 clinicians per week, go to allceus.com/sponsor. Thank you.